I bankrolled and planned significant parts of my brother's perfect Sonoma wedding, only to be treated like a background character and erased from their memories by his bride. Her smug dismissal led me to cancel the final catering payment just moments before the main course was due, leaving 200 guests without dinner and the bride in tears. My name's Ethan. I'm 34, a senior software engineer living in San Francisco, and if my family had a tagline for me, it'd probably be something like the reliable one or the quiet problem solver. It's not that I'm invisible, not exactly. It's more that I've always been the guy in the background, the one making sure the stage lights stay on while my younger brother Kevin soaks up the spotlight. You know the type. While Kevin was charming rooms with his booming laugh and quarterback charisma, I was the one remembering birthdays with thoughtful gifts, handling family emergencies without a fuss, quietly ensuring things ran smoothly. I didn't resent it, not actively. It was just the role I'd slid into, or maybe the one handed to me when no one else particularly wanted the nuts and bolts of responsibility. Kevin and I were never close, not in that bitter shouting match kind of way, just distant. He was the golden boy growing up in Ohio, always the center of attention, star athlete, homecoming king, the whole all-American package. I was the academic one, the quiet achiever, content with my code and my books. Our parents loved us both, I'm sure, but it was always clear who they admired . And I learned early on that it was easier, less fraught, not to compete. So I supported him. I clapped the loudest at his college football games, helped him cram for finals he'd neglected, let him borrow my car when his was inevitably in the shop. That sort of thing. So when he got engaged to Brittany, a woman who seemed to collect social media followers like trophies, I didn't expect to be his best man. I didn't even really expect to be in the wedding party. I'd met her a handful of times, enough to know she was sharp, impeccably put together, and deeply concerned with appearances. She had a way of scanning a room that made you feel like she was cataloging everything for a future Instagram post, the table settings, your shoes, the way you held your wine glass. I always got the sense she tolerated me, Kevin's quiet, slightly awkward older brother, more than genuinely liked me. Still, when Kevin called me last year, his voice full of that familiar breezy confidence, and said, "Hey man, I know you're not big on crowds, but I'd love for you to help with the wedding. It's going to be epic, Sonoma County vineyard, the whole deal." I smiled and said, "Of course Kev, whatever you need." I figured he meant logistics, maybe helping coordinate some tech aspect or looking over a contract. I'm good at that. What I didn't realize was that help meant fronting the entire down payment for the catering and venue deposit. They were planning this lavish 200-guest affair at a picturesque and predictably expensive vineyard a couple of hours north of the city. Plated dinner with 3 options, past hors d'oeuvres during cocktail hour, signature drinks, the whole 9 yards. Kevin explained, with a touch of rehearsed sheepishness, that they were a bit cash-strapped at the moment but wanted everything to be perfect. Could I handle the $10,000 deposit for now? They'd reimburse me right after their honeymoon in Hawaii, promise. I agreed. Stupidly, maybe. But again, the reliable one. I've done well for myself in my field, and the money wasn't the issue, not really. It was more the casual assumption, the ease with which the request was made. But I pushed that thought down. I even found myself coordinating directly with the caterers, arranging menu tastings that Brittany was too swamped to attend, managing timelines, and eventually signing the service contract in my name because Kevin couldn't get away from work. It wasn't just a financial favor, it was a significant investment of my time and energy. It felt like a trust thing, and a small naive part of me was proud to be so instrumental. The lead up to the wedding was the expected chaos. Group chats exploded with minute decisions. Brittany had a Pinterest board that looked like a full-time job. Kevin, in his usual fashion, kept accidentally forwarding me tasks meant for the wedding planner they'd supposedly hired, things like arranging shuttle buses and coordinating with the florist. It became a running joke among my few close friends that I was the unofficial, unpaid wedding planner. I brushed it off. It was family after all. But then things started to shift, subtly at first, then with a clarity that was hard to ignore. The wedding website, a slick affair hosted on the Knot, went live. I scrolled through the wedding party section, Kevin's college buddies, Brittany's sorority sisters. My name was nowhere to be found. Fine, I told myself, not a big deal. I wasn't exactly a party animal. Then came the seating chart. I saw it during a rare family dinner a few weeks before the wedding, spread out on their dining table. My name, Ethan Hayes, was slotted at table 17, tucked away in a far corner right next to the service exit, grouped with a couple of Kevin's distant college friends I'd never met and a third cousin twice removed. When I gently asked Brittany if there had perhaps been a mistake, she gave me this tight-lipped, overly bright smile and said, "Oh Ethan, we just figured you'd prefer something low-key. Didn't want to overwhelm you with too much attention right in the middle of things." That stung more than I expected. The implication was clear. I wasn't middle of things material, but I nodded, told myself not to take it personally. It was their day. I'd handled the logistics, signed the checks. I didn't need fanfare. I was there to support, not to be celebrated. The rehearsal dinner was held at a sleek rooftop venue in San Francisco, overlooking the glittering skyline. String lights, live acoustic music, everyone dressed to the nines. A slideshow played on a loop on a large screen, a montage of Kevin and Brittany's childhood photos, vacation memories, clips of Kevin proposing romantichna on a beach. I sat through 20 solid minutes of curated nostalgia before a cold realization settled in my stomach. I wasn't in a single frame, not one. Not even in the blurry background of old family Christmas shots where I knew I'd been present. My mom leaned over at one point, oblivious, and whispered, "Isn't this beautiful? Brittany did such a great job with the photos." I forced a smile and nodded, but inside something small and vital started to crack. Then came the speeches. Brittany's father gave a long, heartfelt toast about her resilience, her grace, her leadership qualities. Kevin's best man, his old college roommate, told a few sanitized stories about frat parties and late-night study sessions which I'd often facilitated. My name, the brother who'd literally funded a significant portion of this pre-wedding celebration through the catering contract, didn't come up once. When it was Brittany's turn to speak, she raised her glass, beaming. "To everyone who shaped who we are today," she said, her voice saccharine sweet, "the people who lifted us, challenged us, and made us feel like the main characters in our own lives." A few people clapped politely. I didn't. After dinner, I caught Kevin by the bar trying to keep my tone casual. "Hey," I said. Noticed I wasn't in the slideshow. Was that intentional? He looked sheepish, avoiding my gaze. "Oh man, I think Brittany put that together with her cousin. They just picked the highlights, No offense, E." I nodded slowly. "And the seating chart for tomorrow?" Kevin hesitated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before the usual mask of affability slipped back on. "Brittany's idea," she said. You're not big on crowds. Wanted to give you some space." It was such a bad answer, so rehearsed, so dismissive, and for the first time, a truly cold anger began to stir. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being deliberately, systematically erased. Pushed to the margins of my own family's narrative. The day of the wedding arrived, and the Sonoma vineyard was admittedly stunning. Picture-perfect California weather, rolling hills, Vinogradnikov in the background, a string quartet playing softly under a canopy of ivy. Guests sipped artisanal cocktails, and took endless selfies in front of a massive flower arch. I helped coordinate the catering staff as they set up, wearing my nicest suit, trying to fade into the background as I'd clearly been designated to do. Just a background character, right? Facilitating the scene. During the ceremony, I sat quietly in my seat by the service exit, watching my parents beam with pride as Kevin choked up when Brittany, looking radiant, walked down the aisle. It should have been a beautiful moment, a family milestone, but I felt numb, like I was watching strangers in a well-produced movie, a movie I had bankrolled but wasn't invited to star in. The final irrevocable straw came during the reception. After the couple's first dance, after the cake cutting, Brittany and Kevin made another round of speeches, thanking their guests, acknowledging their families. "We're so lucky to have such supportive parents, such incredible friends," Brittany said, her voice sweet and confident, sweeping her gaze across the adoring crowd. And of course to everyone who helped bring this vision to life, you know who you are. No eye contact, not even a cursory glance in my direction. I, who knew exactly who had brought a significant portion of that vision to life with a $10,000 check and countless hours of coordination, was apparently invisible. I was mid-sip of my overpriced Napa Cabernet when I finally stood up. The room was loud, music playing, people laughing. I waited until there was a momentary lull in the applause for some forgotten toast, then approached Brittany at the head table. Kevin was beside her, grinning. I kept my tone light, almost conversational. "Hey Brittany, can I ask you something quickly?" She turned, a little surprised to see me there, so close to the spotlight. "Sure Ethan. What's up?" I smiled politely, the kind of smile you give a difficult client. "Just wondering, and it's probably an oversight, why I wasn't in the slideshow last night, or mentioned in any of the speeches today, or even in the family photos taken earlier with you guys and Mom and Dad." Brittany tilted her head, her smile tightening just a fraction, and then she did something I'll never forget. She smirked. A tiny smug satisfied little curve of her lips. She flicked an imaginary piece of lint off her pristine designer gown, as if my question barely registered. "Honestly, Ethan," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "we just didn't want too many background characters in our wedding memories." Background characters. I just stared at her. The bustling room seemed to fall utterly silent, though I'm sure it didn't. Somewhere behind me, a fork clinked against a glass, the sound unnaturally loud, but I was too busy replaying that sentence in my head. Background character. I, who had smoothed so many paths, absorbed so many of their little crises, funded this very event. I nodded once. No anger, no scene. Just a quiet measured step back from the precipice of their self-importance. Then I returned to my lonely table by the exit, pulled out my phone, and opened the email chain with the caterers. The final payment, a hefty $15,100, was scheduled to auto-process from my account at 5 p.m. that evening to cover the dinner service, staffing, and bar. I clicked Cancel Payment. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this payment?" I tapped yes. The timestamp on the confirmation was 4:56 p.m., and then I sat back, folded my hands in my lap and waited. I watched the party unfold like a detached observer in a dream. Laughter echoed off the vineyard walls. The DJ transitioned from soft background jazz to the first real dance set of the night, and guests, lubricated by the pre-dinner cocktails I'd paid for, started to loosen up. Brittany was twirling in her custom lace gown, Kevin grinning from ear to ear, drinks flowing like liquid gold. No one noticed anything amiss at first. Why would they? The appetizers had made their rounds during cocktail hour. Everyone was buzzing from champagne and filtered California sunlight. But then, something shifted. At exactly 5:23 p.m., I saw the catering staff slow down. One server walked briskly toward the head coordinator, a woman named Sarah, whom I'd exchanged dozens of emails with. Her brow furrowed. Another checked a clipboard, lips pressed into a thin line. They began whispering near the kitchen tent entrance. 2, then 3, then 5 of them. I could see the confusion ripple outward, like a stone dropped into still water. Sarah, the head planner, made her way across the courtyard, her heels clicking urgently against the flagstones as she approached the head table. She leaned down to Brittany and Kevin, whispering discreetly but with clear tension in her voice. Brittany's smile faltered. Kevin blinked, then frowned. I watched him glance toward the catering tent, then for a fleeting second toward me, not accusatory yet. Just puzzled, still trying to process. I sipped my drink. Sarah straightened up, her face now visibly flushed, and headed back toward the kitchen. Meanwhile, servers began quietly, almost surreptitiously, removing the plated silver chargers from the empty dinner tables. No main courses had been served. They were supposed to start the plated service at 5:30 sharp, beginning with the head table. But now, the silverware was being collected, one table at a time, like a slow unraveling thread in the middle of a wedding tapestry. A few guests began to notice. Murmurs started. "Are we not eating? I thought dinner was next. Maybe they're running behind." The DJ, oblivious, played on. Brittany stood abruptly, her pristine dress shifting like water as she walked with sharp, angry purpose toward the catering tent. She passed by me without a glance, which was fine. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. Not yet. Kevin followed her, less composed, his shoulders stiff. The mask was cracking. 5 minutes later, they returned. Brittany was red-faced. Kevin was stone silent. A waiter followed behind them carrying a tray with only bottled water and nothing else. And that's when it happened. One of Kevin's groomsmen, probably a little too buzzed for tact, laughed and said, "Wait, was dinner cancelled or something?" He was joking, of course. But when Brittany spun around and snapped, "We're handling it," her voice tight with fury, the entire table went silent. The murmurs spread like wildfire. I caught snippets. Guests asking each other if they should leave, if this was some kind of bizarre delay, or if they'd missed an announcement about dinner. Someone asked if they could order DoorDash to a vineyard. Another joked darkly about whether the open bar would survive the stampede if food wasn't coming. I stayed seated, calmly nursing my second glass of Cabernet. I wasn't hungry anymore. Brittany and Kevin huddled again with Sarah, who was now frantically trying to call someone on her cell, presumably the catering company owner. But I already knew how this would play out. The contract was in my name. The deposit was paid months ago, but the substantial remaining balance, necessary to release the actual food and continue service, had been stopped just minutes before the plating was due to begin. The kitchen had likely prepped everything, ready to go, but without that final payment, they weren't delivering a thing. And since the vineyard's strict rules didn't allow outside food service, unless previously approved and contracted, Brittany and Kevin had no other options. At around 6:05 p.m., Kevin made his way to my table. I could feel the shift in the air as he approached, the eyes of the nearby curious guests following him. His jaw was tight, eyes stormy but also deeply confused, like he still hadn't decided whether I was the villain or just an unforeseen variable in a wedding rapidly spiraling out of control. "Ethan," he said, his voice low and strained. I turned to him, my expression neutral, not unkindly. "Kevin, did you cancel the catering payment?" I took a long slow breath. "Yes, Kevin. I did." There was a pause, just a heartbeat, but it stretched. "Why?" I looked up at him then, not with anger, not even with active resentment, just a cold hard clarity. "Because your wife informed me I was a background character in your memories. And I realized, Kevin, that I've been paying, in every conceivable way, to stay in a story I was never really a part of, let alone respected in." He didn't speak. His face was a mask of disbelief. I added, my voice quiet but firm, "You asked me to help. I did. I've helped with everything, quietly, without complaint, for years. For this wedding, I handled the caterer, the deposit, the logistics you two couldn't be bothered with. But if I'm just set dressing, to be placed near the exit and erased from the narrative, if I don't even deserve a line in the credits, then no, I'm not funding your fairy tale anymore." Kevin ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, glancing around at the increasingly restless guests. You could have just talked to me, man. Told me you were upset." I raised an eyebrow. "Really, Kevin? Over all the applause for everyone else but me, over the sound of Brittany's dismissal, would you have even heard me then? Or would it have been just another inconvenience for you to manage?" There was no comeback for that. Not a real one. He just stared at me, really stared, like he was seeing me clearly for the first time in years, maybe ever. Then he turned and walked back to the head table, where Brittany was visibly fuming, her face a blotchy red beneath her expensive makeup. Guests were checking their watches, a few were gathering their purses and jackets. The spell was breaking. The magic had unequivocally stopped, and no one but a select few could quite figure out why. But I could. I stood up, buttoned my blazer, and slipped out quietly through the service exit I'd been seated beside. No scene, no drama, just the background character finally definitively fading to black. And as I walked toward the parking lot, the cool evening air a welcome relief, I heard one of the servers explaining politely, yet firmly, to a bewildered guest, "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Unfortunately, we've been instructed to pause all service due to non-payment of the final balance." The guest gasped audibly. "What? Non-payment? But who would?" And I smiled, just a little, as I stepped into the twilight. By the time I reached my car, the vineyard lights twinkled behind me like distant, beautiful, untouchable stars, and they were no longer my concern. I didn't drive away immediately. I sat there for a minute in the driver's seat, engine off, hands loose on the wheel, just listening to the muffled chaos. Raised voices, the scrape of chairs, a frustrated exclamation, drifting over from the courtyard. It was surreal, honestly. A meticulously planned, six-figure wedding unraveling in real time, not because of some natural disaster or public scandal, but because I'd quietly stopped holding everything together. And for once, for the very first time, I wasn't rushing in to fix it. My phone buzzed. First a text from Kevin, Ethan, call me, please. We need to sort this out. I stared at it. Then another from my mother, did something happen? Brittany is hysterical, says you sabotaged the reception. Tell me that's not true, Ethan. Are you okay? What happened? Straight to accusation. No questions asked about my well-being first. Classic. And then a third, this one from my dad, you need to apologize to your brother and Brittany immediately. Fix this before all the guests leave. We're humiliated. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I turned my phone on silent and slid it into the glove compartment. I wasn't ready for their side of the story, their inevitable spin, their attempts to make me the villain for finally drawing a line. I was still sitting with mine, the one that had been silenced for far too long. I ended up driving back to the small quiet bed and breakfast I'd booked for the weekend, about 10 minutes down a winding country road from the vineyard. Not the fancy on-site lodge, where most of the wedding party and close family were staying, of course. I'd picked it originally because it was cheaper and out of the way, a place where I could decompress from the forced jollity. Now, it felt like the smartest decision I'd made all month. When I got there, the innkeeper, a kindly older woman, offered me a glass of port and asked how the wedding had gone. I gave a small tired laugh and said, eventful. I didn't go into details. I just sat in the cozy firelit lounge, sipping my drink, letting the weight of everything, years of it, really, start to lift. It wasn't peace yet, not by a long shot, but it was the unmistakable beginning of it. The next morning, I woke to a digital deluge. 26 new messages, texts, voicemails, emails. Most of them were from family, my mom, my dad, various aunts and uncles, who had clearly been briefed. Some were from wedding guests I barely knew, a few from numbers I didn't even recognize. I opened one from my cousin Jess Kevins, and my contemporary, always the most perceptive one in our extended Midwest clan. Okay, Ethan, spill. 1 minute we're having amazing Sonoma wine, the next no dinner, and Brittany's having a full-blown meltdown. Then someone said you just walked out. Did you actually pull the plug on the catering? Because low-key, that's kind of epic. I actually smirked at that. Jess had always been one of the few family members who got it, who saw how often I played the role of the invisible support beam, while Kevin basked in the spotlight. She wasn't mocking me. There was a note of impressed disbelief, maybe even a touch of vicarious pride, but not everyone felt that way. By 11 a.m., I'd gotten increasingly frantic voicemails from my Aunt Carol, my mom again this time tearful, Kevin twice sounding desperate, and one particularly venomous one from Brittany's mother, Ethan. Her voice crackled with fury. I don't know what kind of petty personal grudge you're holding on to, or what kind of sick satisfaction you got from it, but you single-handedly ruined the most important day of my daughter's life. She was devastated. This was her dream wedding, and you made an absolute mockery of it. Right. Because nothing says dream wedding like systematically humiliating your future husband's brother and treating him like an unwanted piece of furniture at his own family's celebration. Still, I was beginning to feel the weight of it all again. The guilt, a familiar companion, started to whisper insidious doubts. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have handled it differently, more privately. Maybe I should have just waited until after the event, endured one last humiliation. Maybe I should have just let it slide, like always. But every time those thoughts started to creep in, I heard her voice again, crystal clear in my memory, that smug little smirk playing on her lips. We just didn't want too many background characters in our wedding memories. And it all came rushing back. This wasn't just about a slideshow or a seating chart or a forgotten thank you. This was about a lifetime of being quietly dismissed, of being useful but not cherished, needed but not valued. It was about being the safety net, that everyone forgot to thank as they confidently walked the tightrope, blissfully unaware of the drop below. Late that afternoon, Kevin showed up at the B&B. I wasn't expecting him. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, but Jess must have mentioned it to someone in the family grapevine, or maybe he just called around to the local inns. Either way, I looked up from the book I was trying to read in the quiet garden when I saw him walk through the wrought iron gate. His expensive suit was wrinkled, tie askew, dark circles under his eyes. He looked exhausted, and for the first time, genuinely defeated. "Ethan," he said, stopping a few feet away. His voice was hoarse. I nodded. "Kevin." There was a long, uncomfortable silence, the kind where you can hear the bees buzzing in the lavender. Then he sat down heavily on the wooden bench across from me. "I don't even know where to start," he mumbled, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. I waited, letting him fumble. For once, I didn't feel the urge to fill the silence, to make it easier for him. You really canceled the payment?" he finally asked, looking up, his eyes searching mine for something. Confirmation. An explanation he could understand. I nodded again. He sighed, a deep shuddering sound. "People left hungry, Ethan. Some of our out-of-state guests didn't even stay for the cake we eventually managed to scrounge up from a local bakery. Brittany's parents are furious. Her aunt flew in from Florida for this disaster." I didn't respond. Let him talk. "Brittany," she cried all night. "She's still a wreck." "Still." I said nothing. Finally, he looked at me, not past me, not through me, but *at me, and he asked. The fight seemingly gone out of him, just a raw bewilderment remaining. "Why, Ethan? Just why?" I took a deep breath, the scent of roses from the garden filling my lungs. "Because for once, Kevin, I wanted you, and Brittany, and maybe even Mom and Dad, to feel what it's like when I stop holding everything up. When I stop doing the invisible work that everyone just takes for granted. When I stop pretending I'm okay with being erased from my own family's story." He didn't say anything, just stared at his hands. "So," I kept going, the words flowing more easily now than they had in years. "I've never asked for the spotlight, Kevin. You know that. Never tried to outshine you. But I've been there. Every time. Every late-night call for help. Every financial hiccup you needed smoothed over. Every family crisis that needed a calm head, and I never complained. But your wedding, this was supposed to be a family celebration, and for the first time, I didn't just feel like I didn't matter. I felt like I wasn't even welcome to exist in your narrative, unless I was serving a purely functional invisible purpose." He looked down, tracing the lines on his palm. "I didn't know Brittany said that to you, about the background character thing. Would it have mattered if you had known, Kevin?" I asked quietly. "Before all this blew up, would you have said something to her? Would you have changed the seating chart, or made sure I was in a single photo?" He paused, a long telling pause. Then so softly I almost didn't hear it, he said, "I don't know." There it was. The honest, ugly truth, and in a strange way, it was more damning than any angry denial. I let that hang in the air between us for a while. The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a bird sang its afternoon song. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy with unspoken history, but not entirely unbearable. A reckoning, decades overdue. Eventually, he asked, his voice tentative, Can we fix this, Ethan?" I looked at him, at my golden boy brother, now looking so lost and rumpled. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt the balance of power shift between us, not in a cruel way, not out of a desire for revenge, but just to a more equal footing, something we'd never ever had before. And I said, "That depends, Kevin. It depends entirely on what you're actually trying to fix." Ryan didn't reply immediately. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the gravel path like it might spell out the answers for him. I didn't rush him. For once I didn't feel obligated to fill the silence, to smooth things over, or to cushion the blow for him. I'd spent a lifetime doing that, making everything easier for everyone else. It felt foreign, almost luxurious, to just wait. Eventually, he sighed, a sound heavy with a dawning uncomfortable understanding. "I think," he said slowly, I think I've spent so long being the center of attention, so used to things just working out for me, that I forgot what it meant to actually see the people around me. The people making things work. I didn't respond. I wanted to see if he'd keep going, if this was genuine insight, or just another performance. He did. I mean, when we were kids you were always just there. The one who fixed my bike, who handed me the right tools when Dad was trying to teach me something I didn't get, who bailed me out when I blew my allowance, who practically wrote my econ papers in college. I guess I just started treating that as a given. Like it was your job. He looked up at me then, his eyes rimmed with a tiredness that went beyond a single sleepless night. I didn't realize how much I was taking, how much we all were. He was trying, I'll give him that. But I could still see the edge of discomfort in him, the subtle resistance, like he was struggling to fully accept a world that didn't automatically revolve around his needs and desires, now that someone had finally unequivocally said no. Brittany's not a bad person, Ethan, he added, a defensive note creeping into his voice. I didn't flinch, but I felt that familiar twitch of resentment bubble up. I kept my tone even. She didn't just forget me, Kevin. She didn't just overlook me, she erased me, intentionally. And then she insulted me to my face when I had the audacity to ask why. Kevin winced. I know. I talked to her about it, last night. After everything, she didn't handle it well. She's really upset about how the wedding turned out. Ryan, I said quietly, using his first name to underscore my seriousness. She called me a background character to my face. Because I asked why I wasn't in your wedding photos. That wasn't a joke. That wasn't an oversight. That was how she sees me. And if we're being honest, it's how a lot of people in this family have seen me for a very long time. He didn't deny it. He just lowered his gaze again, a flush creeping up his neck. I've always accepted scraps of gratitude, Kevin. I continued, the words now coming without anger, just a profound weariness. Because I thought that's what being the good son, the good brother was about. Taking the scraps and being grateful. But this time, you stood by while she humiliated me in front of 200 people, and the only time you've sought me out, the only time you've really talked to me about any of this, is now that it's directly affecting you and your perfect wedding. He blinked, and for a second, I thought he was going to push back, to argue. But instead, he just nodded slowly, like the full weight of that truth was finally settling onto his shoulders. I'm sorry, he said. Quiet, real, or at least as real as he was capable of being in that moment. I let it sit for a beat before nodding slowly in return. Thank you. We sat in silence for a while after that. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. Just honest, uneasy but needed. A kind of reckoning. Eventually Kevin stood up, brushing off his wrinkled trousers. We'll pay you back for the catering deposit, Ethan. The full $10,000, I promise. I shrugged. It's not about the money, Kevin. It never really was. I canceled the final payment because I needed you and Brittany to feel what it's like when I'm not quietly absorbing all the hits, when I'm not the invisible glue holding things together. You don't need to pay me back for the deposit, but I also don't owe you or anyone more than that. My support, my willingness to always be the go-to guy, that's not a given anymore. He hesitated, looking like he wanted to argue, to bargain, to somehow restore the old comfortable order. But instead, he just nodded again, a look of weary resignation on his face. He offered a hand. I stood and shook it, feeling the weight of 1,000 unsaid things, a lifetime of unspoken dynamics, in that brief awkward grip. Then he turned and left, walking back through the garden gate, a little less golden, a little more burdened. The next few weeks were revealing. I didn't hear from Brittany, which didn't surprise me in the slightest. From what I gathered through the family grapevine, mostly Jess, who seemed to relish her role as informant, she and Kevin had a massive fight the day after the wedding debacle. Apparently, her parents blamed Kevin for letting the catering disaster happen, and her aunt, the one who flew in from Florida, publicly called the event a glorified, very expensive cocktail hour, with pretty dresses but no food. Ouch. They'd postponed their Hawaiian honeymoon. Officially, it was due to unforeseen stress and family drama, Whatever excuse played best on their carefully curated Instagram feeds, I guess. Their posts when they resumed had a decidedly different tone. Less perfect, blissful couple, more humbled by life's unexpected challenges. I noticed, with a grim sort of satisfaction, that Brittany had quietly scrubbed a few of her pre-wedding reels from her social media, the ones that included gushing clips of the rehearsal dinner slideshow I hadn't been in. Guess the backlash, or maybe just the sheer awkwardness of it, got to her. Or maybe someone, finally, pointed out how pointed the omission had been. What did surprise me though, was the varied response from the rest of the family. My mom texted me the day after my conversation with Kevin with a half-hearted, "We should talk, Ethan. There are two sides to every story." I ignored it. 2 days later, she called. I let it ring. Then she emailed, a longer message this time, saying she'd had no idea. I felt so excluded, and that of course, I was a valued member of the family. But you know what? I didn't respond to that either. Because I realized something important in those quiet days at the B&B, the people who genuinely care, the people who truly value you, don't wait until you orchestrate a multi-$1,000 public meltdown to realize they've left you out in the cold. They don't need an empty banquet hall and 200 hungry, disgruntled guests to notice your absence. And I was done playing the game where I had to scream to be seen, or in this case, quietly pull the financial plug. Dad eventually called too. He was more direct, more uncomfortable. He said he didn't condone what Brittany had said, but that I shouldn't have made such a public and damaging statement with my actions. I told him, calmly, "Dad, the most public and damaging statement was them systematically erasing me from every significant part of the wedding and then pretending it was for my own good." I just held up a mirror to their actions. He didn't like that, harumphed a bit, but he didn't really argue. What could he say? What surprised me most pleasantly so, was the number of wedding guests who reached out. Some found me on Facebook. A couple of Kevin's old high school friends, whom I vaguely knew, actually emailed me directly. Jess even forwarded me a group text from a few of our cousins, which included gems like, "Honestly, Ethan was the only one keeping that whole event from imploding even before the dinner thing. Brittany owes him a public apology, not the other way around." One guy, a friend of Kevin's I'd met once at a birthday dinner years ago, sent me a message on LinkedIn that just said, "Dude, I'd have paid you to cater my wedding if I knew you had the stones to pull off what you did." Legendary. That one actually made me laugh out loud. Eventually, about a month after the non-wedding dinner, I got dinner with Jess when she was in town for work. She raised her glass of wine to me and said, with a mischievous grin, "Here's to the background character who finally flipped the script." I clinked her glass. "And here's to never being in the background again." A few months later, an email from Kevin landed in my inbox. Attached was a scanned copy of a cashier's check for $10,000, full reimbursement for the initial deposit I'd paid. I emailed him back, reiterating that I didn't need it, that it wasn't about the money. He insisted, saying it was the right thing to do, so I accepted it. And then I donated the entire amount, quietly and anonymously, to a local food bank in our hometown in Ohio, the same one our mom used to volunteer at when we were kids. I didn't post about it on social media, didn't brag to anyone. I just figured, if that money couldn't feed a couple of hundred wedding guests who probably didn't need another fancy meal anyway, maybe it could feed some folks who'd actually appreciate it. Now I keep my distance from a lot of the family, not in a dramatic, door-slamming kind of way, just intentionally. I don't show up to every family gathering out of a sense of obligation anymore. I don't let guilt dictate my calendar or my choices. I still love my family, in that complicated, messy way you love the people you're bound to by blood. But I'm finally learning to love myself more. And that means setting boundaries, saying no, knowing my worth, even if they don't always see it. A few weeks ago, I got a wedding invitation in the mail, another cousin, on my dad's side. The RSVP card had the usual options: will attend, will not attend. And then, scribbled in tiny handwriting at the bottom, clearly added later by someone with a sense of humor, I suspect Jess had a hand in it, was a third option: will attend only if Ethan is in charge of catering. I laughed so hard I nearly cried. Because somewhere between being the forgotten brother and the guy who nuked a Sonoma wedding reception by simply refusing to pay for his own public humiliation, I'd become a story. A legend even, in some circles. Not bad for a background character. Not bad at all.